research lab. Producing quality products in large part relies on the experience of the user and the production process. Connection validation complements the basic training and normalizes the output based not on the varying degrees of experience of the user, but through the formation of the IMC. Selecting the correct tip geometry and heater series for the application is a basic component of the soldering process and is essential for efficient soldering. Pick a solder tip geometry that maximizes contact with the connection. A flat, blunt tip will transfer more heat than a fine, pointed tip. Choosing the largest tip possible will improve performance and enhance tip life. Metcal's heating technology incorporates multiple alloys to achieve temperatures within the 500, 600, 700, 800, and 900 ranges. The specific metallurgical properties define the maximum temperature achievable by the heater. This enables a user to select the correct temperature range for the job by balancing performance versus risk factors like maximum board or component temperature, flux activation temperature, tip life, etc. With basic solder training, proper tip geometry selection, and the right heater series, the user is now ready to solder using the connection validation system. The solder events start with a red-green flash to the operator. The flash signals to the user that the solder event has started. The user applies solder per their process, forming a thermal bridge. When the green light illuminates, the solder joint is complete. A red light on the handpiece signals to the user that the solder conditions have changed or that the IMC has not formed correctly. An example is prematurely removing the solder tip away from the joint. Metcal is also transforming the way users access critical solder event information. The new power supply incorporates a large color touchscreen with bold graphics, power meter, tip temperature display, password interface, and power curve display. During cartridge construction, each intelligent cartridge is programmed with key information unique to each cartridge. Sensing the power requirements of the load and armed with the key cartridge information, the connection validation power supply calculates and displays the solder tip temperature. In fact, our solder tip temperature display achieves an accuracy of plus or minus 2% at idle for solder tip temperature. In addition to the real-time solder tip temperature display, the connection validation power supply does not require calibration as the temperature is calculated rather than relying on an embedded sensor. Knowing the solder temperature at the tip provides vital information to the process control engineer to better understand the soldering process at the point of use rather than guessing at the target temperature, as is commonplace in other equipment in the industry. The displayed information can also be accessed via a communication port when connected to the CV-5000 monitor software on your PC. 4 key features, power, temperature, solder time, and IMC formation, are captured for each solder event and displayed, and can be replayed. Failed solder joints remain a constant source of printed circuit board failure. Today, reliability relies on visual inspection, operator experience, and skill, control of influencers like tip geometry, tip temperature, and collection and analysis of process data. Each factor involved with the formation of the solder joint is an element of risk and can affect either throughput or repeatability. Mitigating this risk in hand soldering requires the identification of these factors, and with connection validation, you can. The risk associated with soldering activity takes the associated control of variables defined for the process and places success or failure entirely into the hands of the operator. The soldering activity relies on the skill and experience of the operator to judge whether each solder joint conforms to the visual standard. The visual standard and operator skill do not account for the correct formation of the intermetallic compound. Connection validation helps mitigate the risks associated with poor solder joint quality to the organization through normalization of training, improved process control, and reduced scrap related to poor solder joints. Metcal's soldering revolution continues with connection validation. Smart Heat, made smarter. Exclusively by Metcal.